My twin sister, Laura, stood on the iconic red circle of the TED Talk stage, bathed in the warm, adoring glow of the spotlight. She looked magnificent. Her designer suit was sharp and modern, her smile was brilliant and captivating, and her voice, amplified throughout the grand auditorium and broadcast to millions online, was filled with a passion that was utterly, breathtakingly convincing. She was telling the world about the groundbreaking medical discovery she had made, a new protein inhibitor that had the potential to halt the progression of Alzheimer's disease. She was, as the media had already started calling her, a scientific superstar, a once-in-a-generation mind. The only problem, the one terrible, soul-crushing secret between us, was that the discovery was not hers. The research was mine. The work was mine. The cure was mine. She had told me the world needed a star, not a quiet, reclusive scientist. She had no idea that I was about to let the most prestigious scientific body on the planet ask her one simple question. A question only I knew the answer to. I was not in the cheering audience. I was watching on my laptop, thousands of miles away, in the cluttered, sterile silence of my own small university lab. It was 3 a.m. I was surrounded by the evidence of my real life, a stack of failed protein folding simulations, a whiteboard covered in a frantic scrawl of complex equations, and a coffee mug stained with the residue of 100 sleepless nights. I watched as the woman who shared my face, my voice, my very DNA, presented my life's work, my soul's work, as her own. Her performance was flawless. She had a gift for it. She took my dense, jargon-filled research and distilled it into a series of beautiful, easily digestible metaphors. She spoke of retuning the symphony of the mind and finding the key to unlock a lost memory. She told a touching, fabricated story about our grandfather's struggle with dementia, a struggle only I had actually witnessed firsthand while she was studying abroad for a semester in a fit of fashionable wanderlust. She was a brilliant storyteller, a brilliant actress. She was selling my truth with a conviction that even I, the author of that truth, found almost believable. When she finished, the standing ovation was deafening. The online comments began to pour in. A genius, humanity's next great hope. So inspiring to see such a brilliant, confident woman in science. My own phone began to buzz, and my heart sank. It was my mother. I answered, my voice a dry croak. "Hi, Mom." "Eva, darling, did you see her? Did you see your sister?" Her voice was bursting with a pride so explosive it was almost manic. "Isn't she just incredible? A superstar on the TED Talk stage. My father and I we're speechless. She's going to change the world." "Yes, Mom, it was, a very effective presentation," I said, the words tasting like ash. "Effective, honey. It was brilliant," she gushed. "You see, Eva, this is what happens when you have confidence, when you put yourself out there. You're brilliant too, of course, in your own quiet, academic way, but Laura just has that spark, that star power. Why can't you be more like her? You could learn a thing or two." The familiar lecture. I had been hearing it my entire life. Laura was the sun, I was the shadow. She was the charismatic, outgoing twin. I was the difficult, introverted one. They had never understood my quiet focus, my love for the solitary pursuit of knowledge. They saw it as a social failing. Laura's genius was in her charm, a currency they understood. Mine was in my mind, a realm they had never bothered to visit. Later that night, a video call request came through from Laura herself. She was in her luxurious hotel room, already celebrating with a glass of champagne. Her face, my face, was flushed with a victory that was not hers to claim. "Did you see it?" she asked, her smile wide. "I saw it," I said, my voice flat. "And wasn't it amazing? The reaction has been unbelievable. We're already getting calls from major pharmaceutical companies." "Laura," I began, my voice trembling with a rage I could no longer contain. "How could you? You didn't just present my research. You presented my life.
You told stories about Grandpa." Her smile faltered for a second, replaced by a look of impatient annoyance. "Oh, Ava, don't be so dramatic. This isn't theft, it's a strategic partnership. You had the data, but I have the voice. Science is useless if it stays locked away in a lab, buried in footnotes that no one reads. I am popularizing it. I am getting it the attention and the funding it deserves. We are changing the world together." Her use of the word "we" was a deliberate twisting knife. I didn't agree to this partnership. "You should be thanking me," she shot back, her voice rising. "You hate public speaking. You hate the interviews, the glad-handing, the politics. I'm doing the hard part, the part you are completely incapable of. I am protecting you from all of that so you can stay in your little lab and play with your equations. This is for the greater good, Eva. Think of the patients, the millions of people we can help. Our petty sibling squabbles, our egos, they don't matter in the face of that." I was left speechless, not by her logic, but by the sheer, breathtaking audacity of her betrayal. She had stolen my soul's work and reframed it as an act of noble, selfless sacrifice on her part. She had cast herself as the hero and me as the ungrateful, petty sister who couldn't see the bigger picture. After the call ended, I sat in the darkness of my lab for a long time. The injustice of it was a physical weight, crushing the air from my lungs. My family saw me as lesser. My own twin, the person who should have been my greatest ally, had just performed the most intimate and profound act of theft imaginable. I felt utterly and completely erased. I looked at the whiteboard, at the complex, beautiful equation that had taken me 4 years of my life to solve. She had presented the final, elegant answer, but she didn't know the journey. She didn't know the hundreds of failed equations that had led to it. She didn't know about the strange, paradoxical anomaly in the phase 2 data that I had spent 6 months trying to understand. A quirk of protein folding that no one else would ever notice, but which was fundamental to the entire process. She knew the script. She knew the applause line. But she didn't know the work. She didn't know the truth. And in that deep, dark moment of despair, a tiny, cold spark of an idea began to form. She had the world on her side, but I, and only I, had the facts.
In the weeks and months following the TED Talk, my sister's star did not just rise, it went supernova. The world, hungry for a hero, had found one in Dr. Eva Miller. She was brilliant, she was beautiful, she was charismatic, and she had, single-handedly, found a key to unlocking the prison of Alzheimer's. My face, her face, was suddenly everywhere. It was on the cover of Time magazine, under the headline, "The Woman Who Cured Memory." It was on a dozen morning talk shows where she would patiently and charmingly explain my complex science to a captivated audience. It was in glossy pharmaceutical advertisements where she was presented as the trustworthy, visionary leader of a new era in medicine. Every new article, every interview was a fresh torment. I would sit in the quiet solitude of my lab, the place where the real work had been done, and watch my own life's work being narrated back to me by a stranger who happened to share my DNA. She was a masterful performer. She had memorized my papers, my conclusions, my eureka moments. She spoke my words with a conviction that was chilling. The world fell in love with her. And with every standing ovation she received, my own existence felt more and more erased. I retreated into my work, my lab becoming both a sanctuary and a cell. The work itself, once my greatest joy, was now a source of constant, bitter pain. Every data point, every equation was a reminder of the theft. I stopped answering my phone when my parents called. Their pride was a weapon they wielded with blissful ignorance. They called one evening just after Laura had been featured on 60 Minutes. I made the mistake of answering.
Eva, did you see it? My mother gushed, her voice practically vibrating with excitement. 60 minutes! Your sister is buying us a new house. Did she tell you? A beautiful place with a pool. She's so generous. She said it's the least she could do after all the support we gave her.
The support they gave her. I thought of the long years they had dismissed my own quiet, focused work. I thought of the science fair in the 8th grade. It was my first truly ambitious project, a detailed working model of the solar system with a complex system of gears I had designed and built myself. I had worked on it for months. Laura, who had spent that time with her friends at the mall, had shown no interest until the day of the fair. When the judges, 2 high school physics teachers, came to my table, Laura had suddenly appeared at my side. She took over the presentation, her natural charisma and bubbly personality charming them instantly. She didn't understand the science, but she was a brilliant salesperson. She made them laugh. She gestured at my work as if it were a collaborative masterpiece. "We wanted to show how it all fits together," she had said, using the word "we" like a shield. We won first place. The ribbon said, "Eva and Laura Miller." I remember my parents hugging us both. "You two make such a great team," my father had said, beaming. "The brain and the mouth, perfect." They didn't see a theft. They saw a partnership. They didn't see that Laura had contributed nothing but her smile. They saw what they wanted to see: 2 successful daughters, one of whom was just much more pleasant to be around. It was a pattern that had repeated itself my entire life. My quiet substance, her dazzling style. And style, in my family, always won. My silence now, in the face of this grand global deception, was born of that long history. It was a complex, tangled thing. Part of it was a misplaced desire to protect my parents from a devastating truth. The truth that one of their daughters was a fraud, and the other had been a victim her entire life. Part of it was a professional dilemma. If I came forward now, the ensuing scandal would be catastrophic. It could cast doubt on the research itself, potentially delaying a life-saving treatment from reaching the people who needed it. I felt trapped between my duty to my own name and my duty to the science. But mostly, my silence was a kind of paralysis, the quiet shock of a betrayal so profound it was almost impossible to comprehend. How do you accuse your own twin sister of stealing your soul's work? Where do you even begin? So, I worked. I retreated to the only place I had any control. I went back to my original lab notebooks, the real ones, the ones filled with my cramped, frantic handwriting. I traced the coffee stains, the crossed-out equations, the records of every failed experiment. These notebooks were my truth. They were the story of the long, lonely, frustrating, and ultimately triumphant journey of discovery. Laura had the final polished manuscript, but I had the messy, authentic, and undeniable proof of the journey. I turned to the section on the Phase 2 trials, and I found it. The anomaly. A series of data points from a protein folding simulation that for 6 agonizing months had made no sense at all. The data seemed to completely contradict my central hypothesis. It was a puzzle, a paradox that almost made me abandon the entire project. I remembered the sleepless nights, the endless recalculations, the moment of pure, sudden insight when I finally understood the strange quantum quirk that was causing the anomaly. It was the most difficult and most brilliant part of the entire discovery. And it was a part of the journey that was completely absent from the final, published paper. The anomaly was explained away in a single, elegant footnote, its brutal 6-month complexity hidden from view. Laura, in her haste to present a clean, heroic narrative, would have no knowledge of that struggle. She knew the destination. She had no idea how treacherous the path had been. This anomaly, this beautiful, difficult piece of data was the Achilles heel of her lie. The days turned into weeks. Laura's fame grew. My world shrank to the four walls of my lab. And then, one evening, I was watching the international news. The anchor, with a grave and important tone, began to announce the short list of nominees for the Nobel Prize in medicine. When I heard her name, Dr. Laura Miller, for her revolutionary work in halting amyloid plaque progression, the world went quiet. The air left my lungs. The Nobel Prize, the highest, most sacred honor in the history of human achievement. It was one thing to steal a spotlight at a conference, to get a book deal, to be on the cover of a magazine. But this was a desecration. This was a lie being etched into the permanent granite face of scientific history. My paralysis shattered. My misplaced loyalty to my family, my fear of a scandal, it all turned to dust. All that was left was a single, cold, and absolute conviction. My duty to the truth was now greater than any other obligation. The Nobel Prize could not, would not, be built on a foundation of lies. Laura wanted the ultimate prize. Fine, she could have it. But to claim it, she would first have to pass the ultimate test, a test that only I could write. And I knew exactly what the first question would be. The anchor's voice on the television faded into an indistinct drone. The world outside my small apartment window, the distant city lights, the rumble of a passing train, all of it dissolved into a muted gray backdrop. My entire universe had collapsed into a single, horrifying point of light, the television screen, where a photograph of my sister, my twin, smiled out to the world, celebrated as a potential Nobel laureate. Dr. Laura Miller. The name was a lie, a theft, a desecration. And now that lie was about to be etched into the eternal granite of history. For months, I had been living in a state of suspended animation, a ghost in my own life. I had watched her ascend, fueled by my work, my sweat, my tears. I had told myself that my silence was a form of noble sacrifice. I was protecting my parents from a truth that would shatter them. I was protecting the research itself from a scandal that could mire it in controversy for years, delaying its path to the people who truly needed it. I had rationalized my inaction, my paralysis, telling myself it was for the greater good. But this was the Nobel Prize. It was the highest honor our species can bestow, a sacred recognition of humanity's greatest achievements. I thought of the names of past laureates, my personal heroes. Marie Curie, who had carried radioactive isotopes in her pockets. Fleming, with his accidental discovery of penicillin. Banting and Best, who had given the gift of insulin to the world. These were giants, saints of science. And now the name of Laura Miller, a charlatan and a thief, was being spoken in the same breath? The thought was so profane, so utterly unbearable, that it broke the spell of my long silence. My loyalty to my family, my fear of a public scandal, it all crumbled to dust. All that remained was a single, cold, and unshakable conviction. I had a higher duty now, a duty to my work, a duty to my grandfather who had funded my education, a duty to every honest scientist who toiled in obscurity, a duty to the very concept of truth itself. Laura could have the fame, she could have the money, she could have our parents' fawning adoration, but she could not have this. This I would not allow. My first thought was to go to the press, to write a scathing exposé, complete with copies of my original, dated lab notes. But I dismissed the idea as quickly as it came. A public battle was a battle on Laura's home turf. She would thrive in the chaos. She would cast herself as the brilliant, misunderstood victim, and me as the jealous, unstable, scorned sister. She would use her charisma like a weapon, charming reporters and turning the narrative into a messy, tabloid spectacle of she said, she said. I would not give her that satisfaction. My mind, the same mind that had painstakingly solved the puzzle of the protein inhibitors, began to work on a new problem. How do you defeat an enemy who is beloved by the world? How do you expose a lie that everyone wants to believe? The answer, when it came, was so simple, so elegant, so perfectly me. You don't fight a war in the headlines. You fight it in the footnotes. You don't use a cannon when a single, perfectly placed sniper's bullet will do. My weapon would not be an accusation. It would be a question. I spent the next 3 days in a state of intense, focused research. I didn't look at my own work. I researched the 14 members of the Nobel Committee for Physiology or Medicine. I read their papers, their biographies, their interviews. I was searching for one person in particular, not the most famous, not the most political, but the most intellectually rigorous, the purest, the one who believed in the sanctity of the scientific method above all else. And I found him. Dr. Alastair Finch, a brilliant, notoriously meticulous neurobiologist from the University of Cambridge. He was a man known for his sharp, unforgiving mind and his public disdain for what he called press release science. He didn't care about charisma or fame. He cared about data. He was my perfect target. Now, for the bullet. I went back to my lab notes to the 6-month period that had almost broken me, the period I called the winter of the anomaly. I looked at the data from the Phase 2 protein folding simulations, the numbers that had seemed to contradict everything, the puzzle that Laura, in her polished presentations, had never once mentioned. I isolated the single most complex and counterintuitive aspect of my solution to that puzzle. Then I began to draft the email. I wrote and rewrote it for hours, honing each word, polishing each phrase. It had to be a masterpiece of professional subtlety. Subject: an academic query regarding the work of Dr. Laura Miller. Dear Dr. Finch, my name is Dr. Eva Miller. Please forgive this unsolicited intrusion. As a great admirer of the committee's work and a fellow researcher in the specialized field of neurodegenerative proteinopathies, I was thrilled to see the recent nomination of my sister, Dr. Laura Miller. Her paper on the inhibition of amyloid plaque progression was indeed groundbreaking. In reviewing her submitted data, a point of purely academic curiosity arose for me, and I hoped, given your own expertise in complex protein dynamics, you might be able to offer some insight. Specifically, I was fascinated by her ability to reconcile the primary thesis with the seemingly paradoxical results generated by the Phase 2 folding simulations, particularly the data points in Appendix 7b concerning the unexpected behavior of the tau protein under isomeric stress. Her solution is elegant, but the mechanism remains tantalizingly opaque.
Done all I could. I had set the most elegant, intelligent, and devastating trap I could conceive. Now, all I could do was wait and place my faith in the integrity of a good man and in the power of a single, well-asked question. The weeks leading up to the Nobel Prize ceremony in Stockholm were a surreal, out-of-body experience. The official announcement came, as expected. Dr. Laura Miller was named a co-recipient of the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine. My parents were beyond ecstatic. They were practically levitating with pride. They called me immediately, their voices a symphony of joyful shrieks. "Eva, can you believe it? Your sister, a Nobel laureate. We're all going to Stockholm, of course. You have to be there, honey, to support her on her big day," my mother had trilled. "Yes, Mom," I had replied, my voice a quiet echo from a distant planet. They mistook my grim resolve for sisterly pride. And so I went. I flew to Stockholm and checked into a small, anonymous hotel far from the grandeur of the Grand Hotel where my family and the other laureates were staying. I walked the cold, beautiful, snow-dusted streets of the city in a daze, the weight of what was about to happen a heavy stone in my gut. This was no longer just about my stolen work. It was about the integrity of science itself, and I was its last, silent defender. The ceremony itself was a magnificent, gilded affair in the Stockholm Concert Hall, a spectacle of royal pageantry and intellectual triumph. I sat in the audience, a nameless face in a sea of tuxedos and evening gowns, and I watched my twin sister, my other half, walk onto the world's most prestigious stage to accept an honor she had not earned. She was radiant, poised, her acceptance speech a masterpiece of false humility and stolen sentiment. She even had the audacity to thank her brilliant sister Eva for her unwavering support and for being my first and most important sounding board. From across the grand hall, my parents beamed at me, tears of joy streaming down their faces. I felt nothing but a profound, icy calm. The real test, my test, was scheduled for the following day, the Nobel Laureate Press Conference, an event broadcast live across the globe and attended by the world's top science journalists. It was here, in this arena of intellectual scrutiny, that the final scene of our lifelong drama would play out. I took a seat at the very back of the crowded auditorium. On the brightly lit stage, Laura sat at a long table with her co-laureates, looking confident and relaxed. She was a natural at this, a master of performance. The first few questions from the journalists were softballs, personal inquiries into her journey and her inspiration. Laura answered them with her well-rehearsed, heartwarming anecdotes, charming the entire room. She was at the absolute peak of her triumph, the undisputed queen of the scientific world.
And then a distinguished silver-haired man from the front row stood and walked to one of the aisle microphones. My heart gave a single hard thud. It was him, Dr. Alastair Finch. He adjusted the microphone, his expression one of polite, academic curiosity. "Dr. Miller," he began, his voice carrying a crisp British accent that commanded immediate attention. "Alastair Finch, Cambridge. On behalf of the entire committee, allow me to once again offer my sincerest congratulations on a truly paradigm-shifting paper. It is a work of immense elegance." "Thank you, Dr. Finch," Laura said, smiling her most brilliant smile. "That's very kind." "I did have one small point of academic curiosity," he continued, his tone conversational. "For the benefit of my colleagues and the many researchers watching around the world who will be building upon your work. It concerns the data presented in Appendix 7b of your submitted paper, specifically the paradoxical results from the Phase 2 protein folding simulations." I watched my sister's face on the giant screen above the stage. The smile did not falter, but I saw it. A tiny, almost imperceptible flicker in her eyes, a flicker of pure, uncomprehending panic. "The results I refer to," Dr. Finch went on, his voice still maddeningly calm, "are those concerning the unexpected downregulation of the kinase inhibitors when faced with the beta-amyloid catalyst under conditions of isomeric stress. It's a fascinating anomaly. Your paper's footnote on the matter is, forgive me, rather brief. I was hoping you could elaborate for us on the precise mechanism you believe is at play there. It is the central and most brilliant paradox of your data." The room was silent. The question, so technical, so specific, so deeply buried in the minutiae of the raw data, hung in the air like a guillotine. It was a question for the person who had spent 6 agonizing months in the lab wrestling with that exact problem. It was a question for me. Laura's smile became a brittle, frozen thing. I could see her mind racing, frantically searching her memory of the polished, finalized paper for an answer that wasn't there. "That's an excellent and highly perceptive question, Doctor," she began, her voice a little too high as she stalled for time. "It speaks to the complex and multifaceted nature of the protein dynamics at a quantum level. The inhibitors operate within a fluctuating cascade of enzymatic responses, and the isomeric stress naturally creates a feedback loop that—" She was bluffing. It was a word salad of scientific jargon, a string of impressive-sounding words that meant absolutely nothing. To the lay people in the room, it might have sounded intelligent. To every single neurologist, biologist, and chemist watching, it was a declaration of her own profound ignorance.
Dr. Finch was relentless. He gave a small, polite nod, as if considering her non-answer. "Thank you, doctor," he said, "but if I may be more specific, I am not asking about the general cascade. I am asking about the phosphorylation of the tau protein in that specific context. Your data shows it seems to violate the Lin-Chow theorem. It's a remarkable outcome. What was your working hypothesis to explain that specific, contradictory result?" The trap was sprung. He had named a specific, obscure theorem. He was asking for her hypothesis, her thought process. He was asking for the story of the struggle, a story only I knew.
Laura completely fell apart. The color drained from her face. She began to stammer. The theorem? Well, the phosphorylation it's complex, as I said. She looked desperately out at the audience, her eyes finding our parents in the front row, a wild, childish plea for rescue on her face. But they could not help her. She was utterly and completely alone on that stage, exposed under the hot, unforgiving lights of the entire world. A new kind of silence fell over the room. It was not a silence of respect, it was a stunned, electric silence, the sound of hundreds of journalists and scientists simultaneously realizing what they were witnessing. It was the sound of a star imploding. It was the sound of a lie dying. The moderator, sensing a catastrophe of historic proportions, quickly stepped in. "Thank you, Dr. Finch. Our next question, please." But the damage was done. The question had been asked, and it had not been answered. From the back of the auditorium, I stood up quietly. My work here was done. I had not uttered a single public accusation, but I had just handed the world the truth, wrapped in a question. I turned and walked out of the auditorium before anyone noticed I was gone, leaving my sister to be consumed by the fire of a legacy she had so foolishly tried to claim as her own. I didn't stay to watch the rest of the press conference. I didn't need to. I had planted a seed of truth in a garden of lies, and I knew it would grow, its roots cracking the very foundation of my sister's fraudulent empire. I walked out of the grand auditorium, past the frantic, whispering journalists, and into the cold, clean air of Stockholm in December. The snow was beginning to fall, each delicate flake a small, perfect crystal of quiet truth. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. By the time I returned to my small, anonymous hotel room across the city, the digital world was already on fire. I didn't need to search for the news. It found me. Science blogs, news sites, and social media were ablaze with speculation. The headlines were cautious at first, then increasingly pointed. Nobel laureate falters on technical question. Questions mount over Miller's Alzheimer's research. The Appendix 7B question. Experts weigh in. I watched as the community I had dedicated my life to did what it does best. It scrutinized the data. Scientists from around the world were pulling up Laura's published paper, analyzing the question Dr. Finch had asked, and dissecting her vague, nonsensical response. The consensus online was swift and brutal. Her answer was meaningless jargon, one prominent neurobiologist wrote. It's the kind of answer you give when you've only read the summary, not when you've done the work. Another commented, "The anomaly in Appendix 7B is the most brilliant part of this entire paper. To not be able to speak to it is inexplicable. It's a red flag the size of a planet." My single, well-placed question had armed the entire scientific community with the lens they needed to see the truth. The confrontation I had been dreading my entire life came the next evening. There was a frantic, pounding knock on my hotel room door. I opened it to find my entire family standing there, my parents, their faces pale and drawn, and Laura, her eyes red-rimmed and filled with a wild, cornered animal fury. "How could you?" she shrieked, pushing past me into the small room. "You did this to me. You fed him that question. You set me up. You have ruined my life, all because you were jealous of my success." "Your success?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "There was no your success, Laura. There was only my work and your lie."
Eva, please, my mother begged, tears streaming down her face. You have to fix this. Issue a statement. Say you helped her with the research. Say it was a joint project. We have to protect the family. Think of the shame. I looked at them, at their frantic, selfish faces, and I felt nothing but a vast, empty chasm where my love for them used to be. The shame is not mine to carry, I said. My voice is cold and hard as the winter outside. It is yours, all of you. I looked at my parents. You stood by and watched her diminish me my entire life because her brand of success was more palatable to you. You never once asked about my work, only about why I wasn't more like her. Then I looked at my twin. And you, I said, this was never about jealousy. It was about truth. You stole my life's work. You stole my stories. You put my name on your lips in your acceptance speech as a final, cruel insult. You stood on the world's most sacred scientific stage, and you defiled it with a lie. I did not ruin you, Laura. Your own ambition, your own fraud, your own emptiness, that is what ruined you. I opened the door. My loyalty is no longer to this family, I said, my voice final. It is to my work and to the truth. Please leave. Do not contact me again. The official process was slow, methodical, and absolute. The Nobel Foundation launched a private, formal investigation. I was contacted. I flew to their headquarters, not as an accuser, but as a witness. I didn't bring a lawyer. I brought my lab notebooks. All of them, years of them. I presented the committee with my original handwritten notes, the pages filled with my frantic scrawls, my failed equations, my coffee stains, my tear stains, and finally the detailed, dated 6-month journey of solving the anomaly of Appendix 7B. The evidence was not just irrefutable, it was a diary of a discovery. 3 months later, the Nobel Foundation held another press conference. They announced, in grave, historic terms, the formal retraction of the prize from Dr. Eva Miller due to conclusive findings of scientific fraud. It was a global scandal. Laura's career and the reputation of my parents who had so loudly championed her was not just ruined, it was annihilated. But they didn't stop there. In a move that was completely unprecedented, the foundation announced that after a thorough review of the original research materials, the prize for that year was being re-awarded to its true and sole originator, Dr. Eva Miller.
It's been a year. I stand on the same stage in Stockholm, in the same grand concert hall. This time, however, I am not an anonymous ghost in the back row. I am at the podium, the heavy, beautiful gold Nobel medal resting in my hand. I did not use the prize money to buy a house or a car. I used it to establish the Arthur Miller Foundation for Ethical Science, in honor of the grandfather who had always believed in me. A foundation dedicated to funding the quiet, unsung, and honest work of researchers everywhere. My family is not here. I have not spoken to them since that day in the hotel. I have found a new family, a global family of scientists and thinkers who value truth above all else. As I look out at the sea of faces, at the King of Sweden, at the greatest minds of my generation, I think about my long, painful journey. My vindication was not the moment my sister fell from grace. It was not even this moment, standing here with this incredible honor. My true vindication came in a quiet lab, late at night, a long time ago. It was the moment the data finally made sense. It was the moment of discovery. The rest has just been noise. I did not seek the spotlight, but I refused with every fiber of my being to allow a lie to stand in its place. And that, I have learned, is a victory all its own. An absolutely breathtaking story about the ultimate triumph of truth and integrity. What do you think of Eva's quiet, brilliant method of exposing the lie? Let us know your thoughts on this incredible scientific drama in the comments below. If you were inspired by this story of quiet strength and ultimate vindication, please show your support by hitting that like button and be sure to subscribe for more powerful daily stories. Don't forget to click the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.